Alright, and in this video we're going to learn how to build this character in Maya, and later in the video series we'll learn how to rig him and animate him and put him into the game engine. So right now we're going to cover how to build the basic polygon shape, and you can see here it has all the polygons shown. Also of note, we're trying to make it more robotic in this case because we don't want to do the squash and stretch just yet. We'll do it on the next project. Right now we're trying to make the joints separate and bendable mechanical kind of pieces. And so I drew an image of a character, this one. You guys can modify and design whatever you want, but this is kind of just a rough idea. So something simple, no fingers and arms and all that, just some kind of form of two legs and a head and something that can just basically move without bending anything, so just different parts. So you guys can modify whatever you want basically. So to begin, jump over to Maya right here, and we have Maya open now. This is the perspective viewport, and if you want to make more screen space you can move that out of the way. And that was that button up there. Alright, so we can basically start building right now. If I were to take, let's say, a box, I click the box icon, and then I go to the grid over here, I can left click and drag, and it kind of stretches out any different direction of square. And then when I let go, it asks to drag up to set height. So I'm going to click and drag from the center, and it'll pull up a box on the height. Right now it's wireframe mode, and so that means we can see through it. If I switch out, and here's the wireframe mode icon, I can click on shaded mode, and it shades it, and then this wireframe unshaded, which we can't see at the moment, but if I click off of it, you can see it has a blue line on it, and if I uncheck that one, it takes that blue line off. This way you can see where all your polygons are on your finished object. And then a couple of settings, texture and lighting and such. So we can switch between these two if we need to see through the object. But if I click back on this, if I wanted to rotate the screen, Maya uses Alt as the main navigation button. So if I hold the Alt key and then use the left click on the mouse and drag, I can spin in 3D space and look around the different object. Now if I wanted to zoom in, I use the scroll wheel and I can zoom in there. And if I wanted to slide the screen left and right, like I'm looking in too close but I still want to see the top of this, I can hold Alt again and press the middle mouse button and hold it down, and I can pan the screen so I can look at it and kind of slide the screen in different directions. If I don't use the middle mouse button, I hold Alt and use left mouse, it'll spin around the object. So the difference between spinning around it and panning the screen. And then zoom, you can also use the right click to zoom, but you can also use the scroll wheel to zoom. So that covers the navigation aspect of moving around the 3D object. So let's get ready to start building now. So I'm going to delete this by pressing delete on the keyboard. It only deletes if you're selected on it, so selected on it, press the delete key. Now I can keep switching back and forth between the different drawings and switch between, is this what I kind of like looking for, or I can actually incorporate the drawing into the 3D program. It's probably best not to do it in the perspective viewport because you'll be spinning around the screen here. If you press or tap the spacebar, it'll pop out into the viewport mode, and you can see the perspective, top, it says right here, front and side view. And if you press it or tap it again on top of the top viewport, it'll pull you inside top. If you tap it again, you can tap between these. If you hold down the spacebar, you get a whole bunch of other buttons. Mine has a lot of buttons, but just tapping it will switch between the screens. So I'm going to probably drop this in the front viewport. So if I tap and make the screen large, this is the front one, but you could use side or top depending on what you're building. I'm going to go to View, Image Plane, Import Image, and then it'll ask me where this is. This should be, alright, character example is this one, and then this character example is just the image that I need. So I'm going to press open on this, and by default it drops it right into my screen. So if I spacebar back out, you can see that I have an image sitting in the screen. I can spin around it, I can look at it from multiple directions, but it's straight on in the front viewport because I put it in the front. If I want to make it bigger, I can go to the scale option, which is right here, and I can grab the yellow in the middle, and I can scale the image bigger if I want it to be bigger, or I can just zoom in closer. I can also go to the move icon, and I can move the image in different directions, or rotate if I need to rotate. Alright. I guess also of note, if we start building, we don't want to accidentally grab the image and start moving it across the screen. We kind of want that to be glued in place, so we can lock that and put it on its own layer. Kind of like how Photoshop has different layers. We can leave it so we can't select it. Over here is the layer manager area. This icon will create a new layer, and this will create a layer with the currently selected object. And since this is already selected, you see it's purple if not selected and green if it's selected. So I'm going to go click create a layer with selected, and by default it's on view V. If I click that, it'll hide it so we don't have to see it anymore. And the next one over, it's blank, but T is template and R is reference. And so now I can't select it anymore. I can't move it, I can't grab it, it's unselectable. I can still turn it off and on, but I can't grab the object. I can unreference it, and now I can grab it and do something with it and move it. But this way, it's a nice way to put it in your background and you don't have to worry about it anymore. Also, if you don't want to see the grid, you can go over to Show Grid and check that, and it'll take the grid off. So now we can have a nice clean area with an image in here and build right off the image. Alright, so let's get started on building. The first thing I'm going to do is build a round head. So I'm going to click on the sphere right here, and there's two sections of spheres, I guess, or two sections of objects. Surfaces right here has blue ones, and polygons has brownish tan color ones. The surfaces are using NURBS, and we're not going to use NURBS at the moment. It's a different style of modeling and takes different methods of creation. We're going to use polygons, which is more common and used in gaming stuff also. So I'm going to click the sphere, just click it once, and then it says drag on the grid. The grid was turned off, but it's still here. So I can click on the screen and drag, and it makes, as long as I'm holding it, I can drag multiple sizes. So I'm going to drop this right about there for that size. Now I can spin the screen around and see where it landed in relation to where I need it to be. So I'm going to grab the blue arrow and slide it until it looks like it's in place for the character. Alright, so it's pretty close, but it could be a little bit bigger. The scale button is right here, so I click on scale, and I don't want to grab one of these sides, like the green will stretch it this way, and the red will stretch it this way, but the one in the middle will stretch both directions nice and even. Alright, so that looks pretty good. Looks like it's nice and centered. So the next thing, I'm going to come back to the head later. Let's do the body, which is a cylinder. So I'm going to click cylinder, and then click and drag about that wide, and then click and drag to pull upwards, and see where that landed. Alright, the shortcuts for move, rotate, and scale is W, E, and R on the keyboard. So W, E, R. It's a quick way of jumping between the different manipulations. So I'm going to go to move, which is W. Slide this backwards until it's partially inside the drawing. Slide it down. Maybe back another step. Alright, and again this one looks like it could be a little bit larger also, so I'm going to scale this one, and again grab the middle one, otherwise you're going to stretch in multiple different directions, but the middle one will stretch in all the directions. Alright, so that should work right there. So now I want to kind of modify this body type so it does a bit more. So I'm going to go, actually stretch it a little bit taller. Alright, so instead of having just basic shapes right now, and I can turn off the image plane, you can see that I have a circle and a cylinder. But let's modify this. So if you right click and hold down on the right click, you get a couple different options. We have edge mode, vertex, face, and object mode. Right now we're in object mode, so it's just the green object. But if I right click, hold down, and go to, let's say, vertex mode, I can start grabbing different vertices, such as, let's say, this one, and I can move it up and down, and you can see that it distorts the model by pulling on the different points. So to make this more interesting, we can add more points and then start modifying and moving these around. I'm going to grab the middle one first and pull straight down, and you can see that it kind of gives a little more pointed, rounded bottom to them. So before we had this, and now we have, this. So Control Z is undo, Control Y is redo. Alright, so the next thing, let's kind of build out these shoulder areas. So I'm going to right click, go back to object mode, select on this object, and go over to the mesh tools. You only see these if you're in polygon mode, so if we switch out of polygon to animation, you notice that this turns to animate, geometry cache, deformers, skeleton. And for each of these different ones, say dynamics will have its own. So we want polygons because we're modifying the polygons, and this gives us all the polygon modifications. So under that, we're going to go to Edit Mesh and Insert Edge Loop Tool. So I click on this one, and the edge loop, if you left click and drag, will start putting a ring around your object. And once you let go, say right there, it attaches that ring to your object. So I could keep adding more if I wanted to, but I don't need extra rings sitting around our object. So I'm going to Control Z that. Alright, so to cancel the move, notice how the arrow cursor looks a little bit different. You can press, let's say, I guess W, which will switch out to your move icon, which cancels the current command you have selected. Or I guess you could probably also press Enter to cancel it. So Edit Mesh, Insert Edge Loop, press Enter. Nope, we'll just use W to cancel. Alright, so I'm going to grab face mode. And so face mode means I can grab each of these pieces, so one at a time. And if I want to grab more, I can hold the Shift key, and I can grab multiple of these. And I can click off of it and it deselects. So if I wanted to grab all of these, I could manually go around and grab all of these, or the quicker way is to draw a box around it, and it'll select everything inside that box. But that's more than I need selected. So I'm going to go and make a small little box right through just this section. And by doing that, it'll select just that one section and not all of it. And it does select through the other side, so if I turn this off, you can see it selected everything around there. So try and be careful how you're selecting that you don't grab too much on the other side. Alright, so I'm going to go to Extrude now, which is this one right here. And Extrude will give you this manipulator icon. The blue is to the normal direction, which means if you pull this, it'll pull it all out evenly, not just one direction. Green will move it all the way up like this, and then red does this also, kind of distorts it. But the blue one is the one that pulls it directly outwards, so I'm going to pull it out a little bit like this. Alright, that should work. And then once that's done, I'm going to go switch out to edge mode and grab just this one edge right here and hold shift and grab the other edge. If I look at what I've done, I've grabbed this one and I can go to, let's say, scale and pull them out in this direction. So that pulls them out, and then I can also go to move and pull it down, and so he starts to have a little bit of a shoulder design to him. And I go back to vertex mode, grab the middle point, pull that up, and so now he has a little bit more of a shape. I could also grab edge mode. Instead of grabbing one by one holding shift, I can double click an edge and it'll grab the whole loop. And I can pull that up a little bit also to kind of round it some more. So now what I've more or less done is I've modified the shape of him so I can see a little more interesting shapes. I right click, go to object mode, so now we're unselected on it. If you're selected on the guy by clicking the left mouse button, you can switch between different modes. So one is seeing low resolution, two smooths it and lets you see your cage or your outline, and 3 is just the smooth result. So 1 and 3. So 3 smooths it. It's more of a distortion, but it's not actually changing the geometry. There's another way to change the geometry. But 3 is a quick way to see what it'll look like if you smooth the character versus what it looked like before. So if you wanted to permanently smooth it, it's under Mesh, Smooth, right there. So you click on that, and you can see that it's smoothed them out, added more lines and resolution, and when you click off of them, it's the same result, but this time it's not a matter of 1, 2, or 3, whereas 3 was smoothed even further, but this way it stays this way. Alright, so let's keep adding on new pieces. So we've got the chest area built. Let's go build the legs. So I'm going to grab a new cylinder, and I'm going to build this guy from the side view. Let's start right there, and then I can't really see how far it's being pulled out, but if I switch out views I can grab and pull, and you can see on the top left how long that piece got. But you can't really see it in this perspective because of the angle. So I'm going to grab this piece now and move it and put it in position. So it looks like it can be a little bit smaller, and then rotate it, and then move it down and in place. Alright, so maybe a little bit smaller this direction. Alright, so we have one piece there, and if you want to reduce the number of these angles or these segments, you can go over to the inputs while you're still selected on there before you go too much further with modification. Click on there, and then your subdivision axis are right here. So 20, if I set that to like 4, it's going to become more of a square because there's only 4 lines on the outside. If I set it to something like 8, it starts to round again. If I set it to something super high like 60, it'll become really dense on the lines. I don't need that many. It's a circle right now, and if I drop it down to 6, oops, let's just say 8, it's still mostly a circle. So as long as you can keep the basic shape, that's all you would necessarily need. But I'll make it a little bit smoother and put it on 12. So if you wanted to modify your segments, the idea is to make it look the same shape that you want, but keeping as few segments as you can, because that'll take up a lot of memory when you're running your game if you have millions of polygons everywhere. But right now I'm not going with 12, it's not a big deal. Alright, so let's modify this some more. I'm going to go and right click vertex, grab this one point and pull it out so it's a little more rounded, and grab this point and pull it out a little more. So I have more of a rounded shape now. Right click, object mode, and if I press 3 I'll see what it looks like smooth, so I can see where I want to go smooth. But if I go edit mesh, insert edge loop, and put an edge loop right at the very edge of that, and then go into here, you can see the difference. Let's go to object mode. See how it made more of a, let's pop that off, more of a sharper edge versus kind of just a rounded edge. So if I wanted to keep making more of these, let's say, click back on here, put another edge, and then jump back out. So it kind of rounds out the edges a bit more. So instead of having a nice sharp edge, now we have a bit more of a rounded area. So let's take this now and copy it. So Control D is copy, and then I can move this and rotate this back into place. You can also, if it becomes crazy out of position like this, you can go over here to these numbers and reset them, and just select them all, press 0, and it wipes them all back to 0. Now we can see that we probably just want this one direction, and that's this one, so I'm going to set that to 90, and so it becomes nice and vertical. And then I can move this into place, maybe scale it down a little bit in this direction, and then let's add a sphere. I'll drag this, not sure where that went, guess I didn't draw. Alright, try this again. Alright, that can probably be a little bit larger, so we'll scale that. Alright, and there's probably more segments than I really need on here, so I'm going to go to Polysphere, select both of those and put it at like 8. You can see it is really low poly, but it still keeps a general circle, which is all we need. I could put it a little bit higher if I wanted to, let's say 12. You can press 3 to smooth it out, just so it looks smooth. Alright, and that should work there. I'll say I take another one of these and Control D to duplicate and move it up here. I can put, well, let's do this direction and then that direction. Alright, so that kind of puts a little bit of a connection point between the two. Then I can take this guy and scale him a little bit shorter and then rotate him a little more. Alright. And then for the foot, let's grab a square. Draw the square out. And then move it in place. So drawing in perspective isn't always the easiest option. It might be easier to draw like side views, so you know where it's landing when you make it. Alright, let's scale this bigger. And scale it further out that way. And then move it. Alright, so we have a little bit of a square foot right now. I'm going to turn off the drawing and kind of look at how this is being arranged. Alright, so that looks pretty good there. Right click, go to edge mode, and I'm going to grab this front edge and pull it down so it becomes more of a slant. And then grab these two sides and scale these inwards so it becomes more narrowed and more foot-like. And then right click object mode, grab this again, Control D to duplicate, W for move, slide this forward, E for, or R for scale, scale it a lot smaller, maybe a little bit wider, and then W, move that in place. And so he has a little bit of a toe, kind of a separate piece now, maybe a little bit taller. Move it up some. Alright, so he has somewhat of a toe, maybe a little smaller. Alright, and to connect this, let's make it interesting. Let's try a cylinder. I'll draw a cylinder here and up a little bit, and then I'll move this. And let's rotate this. We'll go 90 and zero out the others. And then scale a little bit larger, move and drop this in place there. Maybe a little larger. Alright, now I'll take all of these and move these back a little further. So it looks like he has somewhat of a connected foot to work with. And this will be easier to rig for the first project, since there's separate pieces, than it will be to modify all the topology. Alright, and the head looks like it's a little bit off center, so I'm going to slide that a little more to center it. The reason it's off center is the drawing was drawn from a 3/4 angle, so that kind of isn't quite accurate. You would usually draw it straight on so it looks more symmetrical. Alright, so we finished the one side. Instead of redoing that all over again for the other side, it'd be a lot easier to select the pieces and just copy and paste them over there. We can try and, if we rotated them, the foot's going to be backwards, so that could work. But there's another option called mesh. Mesh. There it is, mirror geometry. Sometimes it's hard to find all these things. Alright, so mirror geometry. If we click this, you can see what happens is that it mirrors each piece one at a time, and isn't quite exactly what we want. We want to take the whole thing and mirror the whole thing to the other side. So I'm going to Control Z on that. And so in order to do that, we're going to combine it all as the one piece. So everything we want is selected. We'll go Mesh, Combine, And now it all becomes one piece. And now that it's one piece, I can go Mesh, Mirror Geometry, and clicking on this little square right here pops up the options. And we want it to be in the negative X direction because we're going on the X-axis right here. It says in red, X. We're going to switch to the negative direction over here. Otherwise, it'll go different directions. And I don't need to merge with the original, so I'll apply that. And it mirrored it. Perfect. So I can close this now. And I want these to all be separate pieces again. So I'm going to go to Mesh, Separate, and it pops them all back into separate pieces. These right here I don't want to be attached to these. So I'm going to deselect these, holding the Control key. And that deselects these. So now when I move, I don't have to worry about grabbing them all over again, one by one. Otherwise, I'd have to grab one at a time and move all of them. So this way it works pretty well. Alright, so we've mirrored that to the other side. And the last thing is basically to build up the head now. So we have the head right here, and let's say I want to put this kind of a top piece on his helmet. I'm going to grab a basic square, and I'm going to draw this in the side view. Kind of draw it somewhere about right there, let's say. And drag the height a little bit. Let's see how that turned out. Alright, that should work pretty well. Alright, so now I'm going to modify this so it has more of a bend. I can't do that with just a square like this, so I'm going to go to the Polycube inputs, and I can set these numbers a little bit. So the width, let's say I put as 2, and it kind of splits it this way. The height we'll do as 4, and that split it the other direction. So we can see it has some points coming vertical, so I don't need that. So I'll put that back to 1. And let's say the depth, I'll put to 4. So I get 4 of these now. And so that should work. We don't want to have too many. The more vertices we have, the more manipulation we have to work with. So the fewer to get your shape, the easier and faster that is. So let's right click, go to Vertex Mode, and I can start pulling these points around. I'm going to take the last row, pull that straight down, and then take this row, pull some of these down, maybe take this one, pull this up a little bit. And so now I've created a little bit of an arch to them. I can also take, let's say, these and pull these out a little bit. Maybe push this one back in a little bit so he has a little bit of popping out. And maybe pull this out. And pull this out. That's probably still a little bit too tall, so I'm going to grab all of this and scale. Alright, so now he has a little bit of a curved top to his head. And it doesn't matter if it's sitting inside of here because it's not going to bend or anything, so we won't see that. If I jump out and go right click Object Mode, we can see the end result. We have a little bit of a top to his head. I could probably go Vertex and round this off a little bit more. Alright, so that should work there. And then the next thing, let's put on some eyes. If you want to see through the drawing, you can click on, or actually you don't have to click anything. If you go to Shading and do X-ray, your object's still there, it's just kind of X-ray throughing it. So it's still selectable and visible, but now you can see through the drawing to the other side. So I can see where the eyes need to go. I'm going to take another cylinder and draw on the front viewport, right on top of his eye. Make that a little wide, and then about that tall, let's guess. Okay, and let's move it forward. I'm going to switch this back to non-X-ray so I can see what I'm doing. Pull this forward, center it on his eye. Let's scale it a little bit longer. And that should work relatively well for centering on his eye. I'm going to go to segments now, or on the caps, and right now the cap is set to 1, so there isn't any extra lines, but if I set this to something like 2, it puts an extra line right there. So So that works pretty well. So now I just have to modify this line. So I'm going to go to Edge Mode, double click that to select this, scale it a little bit wider, and then go to Face Mode. And unfortunately I can't quite click it, but I can manually, let's say, grab all of these, which grabs everything, Control to let go of all those, and so now it's just the center selected, and then kind of Control and gradually deselect all the outer ones. So I just have the inner ones selected. It's a little bit quicker than going click, 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 click for every one of those. I'm going to go to Extrude now, and grab the blue one, and pull that straight back. So now he has more of a shape to his eyes. So right click Object Mode, and we have this. So I'm going to take this object again, Control D to duplicate it, and slide it directly over, and click off of it. So now I have two eyes on the character. And before I do the visor on the mouth, let's do the neck area. So I'm going to grab another cylinder, kind of draw a really thin one, make it rather tall, and then move that. And then duplicate it, Control D, drag it over. So now I have two of them, about as centered as I can get them. Alright, and then one last one. I'll jump and do it in the side view. Draw that, pull it out a little bit. Go over here, move. Alright, so this kind of, let's say I should probably grab all these and push them back a little further. So now he has a little bit of a pivot for his neck, so kind of a mechanical looking joint. Turn off the background image, and you can see that he'll be able to pivot his head forward, backwards. So we're getting a little bit more detailed on him. So the last thing is doing the mouth visor. Turn that drawing back on. And so in this case, I'm going to use just a regular flat plane rather than the square. So I click on the plane, and I'm going to draw this in the side view. So I'm going to draw right across here where I think it'll go. Alright, and let's add some segments in there. So I click on the poly plane inputs. Width, I'll put, let's say, 4. So I have 4 points. And let's go with 2 on the height, so it splits it in half. Alright. And jump back and let's start modifying. So I'm going to pull this outwards so it's kind of sitting outside of them, and then go to Vertex Mode, take the front ones, push that all the way until it's in front of them. And if I wanted to snap these in place, I can hold X on the keyboard and it'll snap, or it should. Let's jump out and do this in the front view. So we can see these grid lines. If I hold X and try and move it, it should snap to every one of these different grid lines wherever I'm at. It wasn't doing it in the perspective, probably because it didn't know which angle we were at. This way it snaps it perfectly in place. So now we know it's centered right in the middle of his face. Which I guess his head's a little bit off, so we can play with that. Alright, so let's take the next ones, pull that in a little bit, pull it forward, take the next row. And that should work there. So we have the visor starting to curve over. Let's turn off the drawing. I'll shrink these down. Let's scale them in. Take the next set, scale that in. And the next one. And I can take, let's say, this one, pull it up a little bit taller, maybe the bottom one down a little further. And kind of just modify these so they look more of a consistent shape. Alright, so we have the visor kind of blocking his face now. So probably pull this over a little bit more. It looks like it's more centered in this position. Alright. So the next thing, let's go to object mode, select this. Actually, let's go to face mode, select all the faces. Let's go to extrude. So I'll extrude this. Let's say right now if I grab the blue arrow, not the blue box, it'll pull forward and give some thickness. So now we have a bit more of a thickness to his visor. Let's say we click the blue box on the outside, and that'll switch it to scale now. So now I can scale it and it'll angle it inwards, but I'm going to go and repeat the command before I do that. So extrude again, click the box, and now I can scale inwards. And that kind of puts an edge around there. So the first time we extruded it created thickness, and now we have an edge around there. And I can extrude one more time and push it inwards. So now he has a much more pronounced outer edge on the mask. Now I'm going to grab just these two and extrude again. Click on scale and scale this inwards. So now he has what will be a hole in his mask eventually. And I'll extrude one more time and push it backwards until it looks like it's starting to fade across because we're hitting the backside there. And then I'll press delete on that. So it deletes that out. And I can also get rid of these back pieces. These two over there also, and press delete. So now it leaves a hole. It's not the best modeling practice, but since we're not going to see it from this side, it saves on polygons. But if you're going to get close enough where you see the other side, you might want to consider leaving that for texturing purposes, because otherwise this will disappear when you look at it from this side. Alright, so we have a hole right there. And if I want to put another hole, but not quite as large, I could go to Edit Mesh, Insert Edge Loop, and split this, let's say right there, and then go to Face Mode, and extrude. Click on this box to get to scale, and scale this inwards until it looks proportionally like the next segment should be. And then extrude one more time. Grab the blue arrow, push it back until it looks like it's far enough, and then delete out the back pieces. So now I have two dents in this mask, and I can keep going if I wanted to and make more of these. The last thing, back to object mode, let's put a little pivot point on there. So I'm going to grab cylinder and draw this in the side view. Alright, and move it in place. Alright, so he has a little bit of a pivot point, and I can keep modifying this and rotating it and putting it in other places. So the last thing is we have two separate pieces here, and if I want to mirror this, we want to combine it again. So mesh, combine. So now it's one piece. And I'm going to go mesh, mirror geometry. Pull up the options, make sure it's still set to -X. Press apply, and you can see it mirrored his mask to the other side now. It also left a bit of a crease in the middle because the way the points were modified. So if I want to get rid of that crease, just click on this guy, go to face mode, and delete out these middle faces that are kind of in the crevice area. Press delete on the keyboard, and that puts a hole in his mask. The last thing is go to vertex mode, and I'm going to take this, take this vertex and this one by holding shift to grab two of them, and I want to merge these together. So if we go over to mesh, edit mesh. Not sure exactly. Average versus smooth. Usually the faster way instead of looking through all these things. If you hold shift on the keyboard and right click, you can go to merge vertices, and as long as you're holding shift and right click together, you can pick lots of different menus. So I'm going to merge vertices to center. And that's a quick way of doing that without having to find it up here in the menu system. So I'll grab both of these, shift, right click, merge vertices, merge to center. So there's lots of buttons in Maya, and they have repeat buttons to make things go faster. Alright, so that kind of merges that together. Go back to object mode, and you can see that he has a visor now. And we have a guy that's mostly completed. If I put back on the image plane, we can see that we've modeled him onto here. And it's not quite symmetrical again because he's turned 3/4. Let's unreference the background, grab the background image and slide it over so we can see everything that's been built so far. We have the top of him. I didn't quite build the glasses on there, and I don't have a shield on there, but the rest of it's on there. I could build a shield real quick. So let's put the drawing back in place and re-template that, reference it. Let's turn it off. Alright, so let's grab, let's say, a square, and let's draw this in the front viewport. Alright, that'll work. A little bit of thickness there. And then let's start dividing these up. So let's put this at 2. Let's go 4. And we'll do this at 3. Okay, we don't need that one. And this one at 3. Alright, let's put this back at 1. Alright, so we have a couple different points now to work with. Let's jump back, go to perspective mode. This is probably thicker than we need it to be. So I'm going to scale it inwards a little bit, slide it over in front of him. And it looks like it's pretty centered here. Pull that down a little bit. Alright, so let's go to Vertex Mode now, and this will be your highest points. So let's take both of these down, and take the next 2 down. Let's bring these also. And then I'll take these points up, and these up some more. And also note, when I'm grabbing these, I'm sliding across by selecting them. If I just click it once and click the other one once, the scale, I'm not grabbing the piece behind. I'm only grabbing the ones in the front. So by selecting through it, by going a border select, it'll grab both pieces, even though you can't see both from the front view. It grabs front and back, so when I scale it this time, it doesn't have that problem. Alright, so that kind of builds a bit of a shield in front. If I wanted to make it a little more, I guess, elaborate, I could take 4 of these and kind of adjust it some more. Alright, so kind of centering it this way it looks a bit more. If I wanted to curve the shield backwards, I could do it piece by piece, grabbing all these vertices and pulling it backwards. Or I could create a lattice if I wanted to globally do it. So I'll experiment with the lattice. So a lattice is under polygons, switch that to animation, and then create deformers lattice. I'll open the box. And the last setting I used was 252. If I apply that, we'll see what happens. Alright, so I've got 4 of these here. That could work. Alright, so I'll leave that for now. And then go to right click on here, lattice point. So now I'm grabbing these points on this other box. So I'm not grabbing the points on the polygons anymore. I'll grab this and I'll pull this back. I'll grab the next set and pull this back a little bit. Let's grab this and pull this forward. So I've just basically warped this shield by grabbing these points, which are modifying all of the shield. So when I'm done, right click, go to object mode, and if I want to get rid of this lattice, I can grab both of these together, go to edit, delete by type, history, and it'll keep the deformation but get rid of the lattice. And to repeat this one more time, let's switch this out and go 5x2 and apply. And so now I've created a vertical line this way. So again, lattice point, grab these two, or this two section, pull that backwards. And I'm also just grab the middle, pull that forwards. Alright, and so now we have more of a rounded thickness, so the shield is bending backwards, and it's also bending this direction. So multiple directions, more of a convex compound shape. Press apply. Oops, I don't need to apply, it's already done. So object mode, select both of these, edit, delete by type, and I want to get rid of the history on both of those. So I can close this, and I've very quickly modified and created a shield to go on top of them. And if I wanted to make it more detailed, I can go to face mode, grab all these pieces, and extrude, click to scale mode, and scale it in a little bit, and then do one more extrude, and push it back a little bit. Object mode, and you can see that I've added some detail to the shield real quick. And that should work for a character. Next video session we'll be doing rigging and putting them all back to, or getting ready for animation. So to save the guy, let's go File, Save Scene As, and I'm going to put this on the desktop and call this Demo Character, or Demo Video Character, and press Save As. This is my binary. There's a couple options. There's my ASCII, but I'll go with my binary. Do Save As, and student version, and press OK. Okay, and that's it for building the character.